10 years before the night of Stonewall, in 1959, the modern LGBT+ rights movement began with a night of queer empowerment and resistance, with coffee cups flying from the hands of drag queens, as the LGBT+ community fought back against an ongoing campaign of targeted police brutality and harassment. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Pride Month finally, and I know it's been a really rough couple of months for people coming inside, not being able to go out with your friends. I'm sure a lot of people are disappointed that a lot of Pride events are canceled this year because of the virus, but we all need to remember that this is saving lives, and not being able to go out some night to a bar with your friends isn't the end of the world. We have other years that we can do it. So I decided, instead of my usual Pride activities, I'm going to be making a video a day of different campaigns of LGBT people about how our rights have changed from the beginning to now. I'm going to be highlighting a bunch of the most influential queer people who have lived, who are alive today, to talk about. And I hope this way we can all kind of remember why we're allowed to be celebrating Pride the way we do nowadays, and not forget the ones who came before us. So today I'm going to be talking about an original LGBT+ riot. It was the Cooper Donuts raid of 1959, and it's one of the earliest demonstrations of queer people fighting back against the police, which is something that we need to remember. The police are not our allies, the police are not our friends. They have always been against us, and they shouldn't be allowed at Pride. Like, that's it, that's end of story. They should not be allowed to be marching with us in the streets, or pretending to be our friends, or doing any of that, especially with how the world is today in America and around the rest of the world. They're not our friends, they're not our allies. So, that being said, let's jump right in. So a little background, the Cooper Donuts Cafe was a 24-hour, coffee joint, donut joint in Los Angeles back in the 1950s, and it was a well-known hangout for trans and queer and LGBT people. A very diverse place. Now, at this time in Los Angeles, the law was if your outer appearance did not match your gender ID, they would take you to jail. And a lot of LGBT people were targeted. Lots of weekly raids and entrapment campaigns. Intimidation and violence was often used against us. And as a result of these trans and non-binary people being targeted most often, a lot of the secret underground gay bars that there were at the time banned trans and gender non-conforming and gender non-binary people, because they felt if they let these people who didn't identify with the gender that they were assigned with at birth, the bars would be targeted more often, so they just did not let any of these people into their bars. Now, Cooper Donuts, on the other hand, was completely opposite. They went out and welcomed trans people, the people of the non-binary community, drag queens were allowed to be in there, and sex workers, and basically others who weren't welcomed in other venues because of their visibility. Now, in these underground gay bars, there were rules that a lot of us know, that you must be wearing 3 items of clothing that match the gender that you were assigned with if you were in these venues. Raids would very often abuse gender checks. This is where a police officer would confirm someone's gender by literally stripping them of their clothes to look at their genitalia, most often in full view of everyone who was in the room. Now, on this particular night, tempers were running high in the community. So imagine you're out with your friends, having a kiki, and you feel like you're not welcome at this gay bar, so you want to go out to a nice, calm place where you can go and have some fun. Cooper's Donuts was this. So on the night in question, There was the normal crowd at Cooper's, a bunch of trans, non-binary people hanging out with drag queens, kikiing, having a good time. And this night something snapped. The police came in for a raid and tried to arrest 2 patrons, including 2 drag queens, 2 male sex workers, and a gay man. So while they were being dragged away, kicking and screaming, trying to protest their arrest, the people around them started shouting back and trying to pull the people away from the police. The police started attacking them, and so the people of Cooper Donuts decided that enough was enough, and they stood up for themselves. A group of transgender women, lesbians, drag queens, gay men started spilling out into the streets and throwing donuts and coffee cups and spoons and knives and everything that you find in a cafe. They were just throwing them until the police finally backed down. They left the people they were dragging away and retreated. Backup was eventually called, but the rioting had already kind of gotten out of hand, so it continued on through the night. Basically, it was so big that they had to close the street and start doing arrests throughout the next couple days. Now, this isn't kind of what we would think of as a huge riot or a huge foot forward for the gay community, but we have to remember this was a time where gay people were so scared of being caught or standing up for themselves that they would often hide. Cooper Donuts kind of showed that when we come together and support our trans brothers and sisters, our gender non-conforming, gender non-binary brothers and sisters, or people who don't identify as a brother or a sister, together we're a lot more powerful. And if we really look at the LGBTQ in our community, we're all in this together, and from our numbers come strength and power. The years following this riot kind of sparked the gay rights movement that we know of as today. People standing up against harassment and bullying from the police and from the government and from the community at large. Protests such as the New York Army Induction Center protest in 1964, the Independence Hall protest in 1965, Dewey's sit-in in 1965, which we'll talk about later, Compton's Cafeteria Riot in 1966, which we'll talk about in a couple days, the Black Cat Tavern Riot in 1967, and ultimately 10 years of Stonewall riots in 1969, which, as we all know, a year later marked the first Pride Parade. All that is to say, I hope that you like this first episode of my LGBT queer series. Tomorrow we'll be talking about some members of the LGBT plus community that are working today to change laws and people's minds, and also some in the past that we'll get to. If you like this series, make sure to like and subscribe. All my social medias will be found below. If you want more information on any of this, just message me. I'll also leave some links below that you can follow, and make sure you share. We want people to kind of remember and learn a lot of our history, because if we don't know our history, nothing's going to change. So thank you for coming in and joining me today. I love you all. Happy Pride, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.